Alrighty everybody, we're back in our next video, and this one is going to be a doozy. We're replacing the servo motor and the servo controller board for our monster in Frankenstein. Now, it's not a horrible task to do. There's quite a few steps you do have to do in order to make this work, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step, alright? Now the first thing I want to point out, here's the original servo motor controller board. We are going to be replacing it with a no quarters arcade servo controller board, which is made by Frank. So we know it's going to work. That guy is pretty smart. He knows what he's doing here. And we're going to replace the servo motor itself in the monster. Granted, I think the servo motor in this one is working fine, but I want to go ahead and replace it all because it is a little bit tedious to get this monster head out and replace it all. So, just to go through it, the things we have to do to get the monster out. These two screws or nuts right here, and those two nuts right there is what holds the entire monster assembly in place. So once we take those out, we can actually pull the monster out. But before we can do that, we need to remove this coil right here, which is done by those two screws, okay? You'll take those two screws out, this plate's going to come out, and then we can slide the coil out and just let it kind of hang here off these wires and stuff, okay? The coil is what allows the monster's arms to throw the balls when he's holding onto the balls for a multi-ball feature, okay? So we need to remove this in order to actually take the monster out. Otherwise, we'd have to desolder these wires, and there's no reason to do that when we can just slide the coil off the plunger and just kind of go from there. Now, when we look on the other side of the playfield, we can see our monster, alright? And like I mentioned before, the coil itself that we're seeing actually controls the monster's hand movements. They're already in the locking position here to grab a ball, and when it's time to throw the ball, the coil will activate and it will move these arms up, alright? The servo motor controls the head of the monster. Alright, and ours has not been working properly. It's been acting erratic, and I believe it truly comes down to just the actual controller board. But since it is, like I said before, a little tedious to go through the work of tearing the monster apart, let's just go ahead and replace the servo motor and the controller board itself. I'm sure the motor's fine, and I'll try to repair the original servo controller board, and then maybe we'll keep them for spares or sell them. We'll just have to see. But other than that, I'm going to put you up on the tripod, and we're going to get this monster removed. Then we'll go out to the shop and tear the monster apart and replace the servo motor. So here we go. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and get this taken care of. You may hear some sounds in the background. That's my daughter. She's playing one of our multi-cades right now and having an amazing time with it. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and start tearing this bad boy apart. So one of the first things we need to do is unplug the servo motor from the servo controller board. We don't need that in there anymore. Next thing, we want to take this mounting bracket off for the coil, so we can slide the coil out of the plunger and then work on the rest of it to take the actual monster off itself. So we'll take our nut driver and get these screws removed on the actual coil bracket. Alright, there's our coil bracket with our coil stop. That's just my daughter. Don't worry about her. She's okay. She's cool. I promise you guys. Then we'll slide the coil right out of the plunger, and we'll very carefully put it up against some of these wire harnesses just to hold it in place. Alright? Now we'll remove these 4 nuts, and the monster itself should come right off the bracket. If you see the camera move at all, guys, it's because my daughter's playing with it. She likes to mess around with stuff. She's okay. She's a good girl. Yeah. She likes to watch her daddy do different things like this. And she has her own commentary about it as well, too. She's always telling me whenever I'm doing something wrong. See, like that. She's letting me know right now that I'm talking too much. It's okay, sweetheart. Alright, there, we got all the nuts off now. So let me take you off the tripod and we'll take it from here. Alright, like you guys just saw, I took those nuts off there. So now we should be able to actually remove our Frankenstein monster. Sorry about the lighting, but see, he's nice and loose. And here we go. He might come right out. He might, oh, there we go. Look at that. And there he is. Frankenstein's monster. Alright, so let's go ahead and get him out to the garage. And we're going to start tearing him apart so we can replace that servo motor. Alright, see you guys there in a minute. Alright guys, so we're back out here in the shop. And it's time to go ahead and take our Frankenstein's monster apart. Now, I did take the head off outside of the video. Reason being is I was having a pain in the ass of a time getting to the screw that holds the head to the servo motor, because there was a couple of washers actually inside of here. For some reason, I don't know why, but there was washers in here. It wouldn't let me get in, so I had to really work my butt off to get those washers out, and I just didn't feel like filming myself swearing up and down. But there's a flat blade screw inside of this head. That's where the hole comes in, like you can see right there, and that attaches directly to the servo motor. Once I loosen that screw up, the head will pop right off. Alright, and as you can see here, there is the servo motor. Now, what we need to do to get to it is we need to get this body off of here. By the way, another thing I did off camera was I removed the springs that are for this plunger piece here. That's because when I brought it out, they started springing out of the body, and I didn't want them to go flying anywhere. So I just pulled them out of there, get rid of them, take care of it kind of thing. But what we need to do now, we need to remove these 2 screws right here, okay, and then this screw right here. This screw is actually pretty loose. I'm not sure why exactly, but it doesn't, I guess, fit properly. Not quite sure. So we'll get these 3 screws out of here. There should be 4, but it's missing 1 on the back side. I'm not too worried about it, because as long as everything's held together properly, then we have no issues. That's kind of the way to look at it. Not sure what happened to the... oh, there it is. Okay. Now, technically, this should just pull right out. The arms will come with it because they're part of this plunger. Might have to maneuver a little bit just to get everything to pop out of there properly. Yeah, they don't seem to be wanting to just come right out. So we might have to remove one of the arms in order to get it to come out all the way. So let's try that and see if that helps us out at all. That one will even come off. That's on there pretty daggone good, I tell you what. little bit of force it's looking like. There we go. We said to use a little force to slide it on through. So we'll reattach this arm real quick. Just took some force, that's all. Nothing too major. We'll reattach this. And that's just something we got to remember. When you go to put it back together, it's going to take a little bit of extra oomph to throw that bad boy in there. But when you look at the assembly, here's our servo motor. That's what we're going to be replacing. And then here's that little link, alright, for the coil. And as you can see, when the coil sucks in, it pulls the arms forward, which throws the ball onto the playfield. That's how simple that is. Not too big of a deal. But our number one goal is to replace that servo motor. So we'll pull the servo motor wire right out of the hole there and get ready to replace it, which from the looks of it shouldn't be too bad. It's 4 flat blade screws. I don't know what size, they are hex heads. I don't know what size they are, so we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to use a flat blade screwdriver and remove them. Just like so. They're pretty long, so you might think you got it all the way out, but that's not a guarantee. Now you could also remove 4 hex screws, 2 on this side and 2 on this side that hold these brackets in place to remove the servo motor, but you're not really removing the servo motor, you're just taking it out via the brackets. You still have to unscrew it, so there's no point in going through all that work when all you really should need to do is remove these 4 screws and the servo should come right out. And I say should because who knows, sometimes it might be wedged in there where you're going to have to remove at least 2 of these screws to take one of the brackets off to get it out, but I don't think you're going to have to. We're going to find out here in just a second, because the servo is pretty loose as it is already, and I even got all 4 screws out, so it's looking pretty good on our part. Okay, and there it is, the old servo motor. Pretty simple. Now, we're going to put the new one in. Now the new one, I did this off camera as well. It comes with the blade attached to the servo motor with a screw in it as well. I removed this because the head is directly screwing into that little tang piece on the servo motor. So there's no need for that. What we're going to do is just install this in the opposite way we took out the old servo motor. Put it into place, put these screws in, and we're going to tighten it down. Oh, and just so you guys are aware, I got a buddy coming over tonight. So if you hear him in the background with him and his little puppy dog, that's who that is, just so you're aware. No surprises. But I already got the screws started, so let's go ahead and get them tightened down. So we move on to the next part, which is reassembling the arm and mounting plate into the body, and hooking the head back up. And hopefully that's all we really need to do besides adding in our controller board for this servo motor. Later in the video we'll do a little bit discussion on the theory on how this is supposed to work. I've only done so much research on it, so I'm going to be kind of limited on what I currently know on how this is supposed to work. But from my understanding, it's all to do with timing, milliseconds and so on, and voltages. So I'll have a voltage coming in or a signal coming in, that allows it to turn one direction, and it's going to reverse that voltage, almost like a negative voltage, to create an opposite directional turn with the servo motor. And this particular motor is a motor that can do 360 degrees. So that's why it's very important that we make sure that the signals and all that are working the way they're supposed to work. So, other than that, I'm going to try and get the spring hook back up on here so that we can actually make the coil part work as well. Because like I said before, the spring popped out, and unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to pop back in here without having to actually disassemble it even farther. I think I'm going to have to disassemble it further in order to do that. Thankfully, there's just an E-clip here. And no, this is not the proper way to really remove an E-clip, but, you know, it works, so I don't care. That's how I look at it. Take a screwdriver, pop it off. Take this bad boy, pop it out of the place, just like so. Okay. We're going to add our spring on there. Get our plunger foot back where it's supposed to go. And then reattach that clip via a pair of pliers. There it is. Put this clip on. Oops. That's okay. Get my pliers ready for it anyway. And we're going to just push it on. Now they do have E-clip and C-clip removers and such, like pliers to help remove them and put them back on, but I actually don't own any. I know, it's like, wait, how do you not own such a cheap tool? I just don't. This is honestly how I've done it forever, and I've never had problems. So I have never changed. Gotta make sure I get that bad boy just right. And of course the spring pops through the hole like it shouldn't, but it did. Okay. Alright, so we're in place again. So that's good to go. Now, we're going to go ahead and reassemble this bad boy. And like I said before, well actually before we do that, let's run the wire through the hole. The front hole right here is where the wire is going to go. And that's that for that. So we'll wedge this bad boy back into place. Again, it's going to take a little bit of oomph and probably some naughty words to do it. But we'll get it. It'll take a little time, but we'll get it. Of course, that spring keeps popping out. There we go. Back in place. Now let's try and get this bad boy wedged in there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove this arm again. I know before I didn't really have to, but I really think I'm going to need to at this point in order to make this thing work properly. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of this. That. There we go. Alright, it's in place now. You just got to put the arm back on. sure it's positioned properly. There we go. Almost. Alright, there we go. Washer and nut. There we are. Okay, so there's that. Now we just need to attach the three, should be four, but the 3 screws that holds these mounting brackets in place. And then try and line up and attach the Frankenstein's head. Once that's done, then we can reattach this bad boy to the playfield again. Give it a test and see if it works or not. Of course, the spring pops through on the plunger again. What's new? Alright, I see what I screwed up. These ones are supposed to be on the other side. Okay, and we'll put these ones on the proper side. Just like so. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and put on our monster's head. And we'll be all done with this little part. We can throw it back on the old pinball machine. So, we want to line up the little sprocket right here with the little sprocket in the head. And then we should be good to go. Should be semi-lined up and ready. Hopefully, that's the goal. So, we'll get that thing on there. There we go. Now we get our screwdriver in there and we want to tighten down this screw a little bit. If I can actually get the daggum screwdriver lined up. Oh, I think I finally got it. Let's see. It doesn't seem to want to be tightening down, y'all. I don't know why. Maybe we need a different screw. We'll find out in just a second. Maybe we need a little extra force or something like that. We'll get it to work, one way or another. We'll be back once I figure this shit out. Alrighty, so, as you can see, I've already reinstalled the Frankenstein's monster. I didn't film that part because I kind of had to get it done right away for a birthday party. But it's really simple, just reversal like we did before. You put the monster's body in, and you tighten down these 2 nuts and these 2 nuts over here. And then you reinstall the coil, and you attach that with those 2 bolts right there. And that's it for that part. Now, the other thing we did to upgrade this, besides replacing the servo motor inside the assembly, which you saw before, was we replaced the servo motor control board with a new version from Frank. It's the Frankenstein version 2.07. This here is the original board. I believe this board was the actual issue and not the servo motor, but I figured since I had the whole assembly, I might as well just do the entire thing. So I'll look at that board and see if I can't fix it in the future as a backup. But right now we're going to run Frank's board. And it's got the new servo motor. And you just install this board with these 4 little legs on the outside. I didn't put the screw on the bottom one there. It didn't seem to matter. It's holding pretty good. And then you plug in your servo motor. Now there are 2 connectors. It's a J2 and a J3. And you use the J3 for a more newer servo motor, which came with the kit. And that's the reason why is because the red wire, the main power wire, is in the middle of most of the new servo motors, while the red wire for the original servo motor would be this like pin 1 kind of thing, like over to the far left. So if you use the original servo, you want to plug it into this connector. Using a new servo, or the one that comes with Frank's kit, you use this connector, J3, okay? And then you got your 5-pin connector on the side here for your inputs and output signals that are coming from the PCB board itself. Now, the way these things kind of work, at least from my best understanding, is mainly through this chip you see right here. It says Frankenstein 2.07, and this is more like a buffer chip right here. Essentially what's happening is they're sending signals from the PCB board to this board, which is converted by this chip or interpreted by this chip to tell the servo motor what to do and when to do it. It's all about timing in the milliseconds. So imagine it like setting a positive voltage and a negative voltage to like a DC motor. If you put positive voltage on, it's going to spin in one direction. When you put negative voltage on, it's going to spin in the opposite direction. Same kind of concept applies here. In a more basic, I guess, term, imagine it this way. This chip is interpreting a positive signal coming from this line from the PCB, telling the servo motor to move Frankenstein monster's head to the right at a certain amount of time, let's say 2 milliseconds or 2.2 milliseconds. And then it will stop it and make it reverse to the left by using a negative voltage coming through at the same thing with a millisecond time. So it knows, like, alright, I moved to the right 2.2 milliseconds when I had my positive voltage being applied to all this. And now I'm having a negative voltage being applied, so now I need to move it 2.8 milliseconds to the left. So he looks more towards the left. And this game is programmed at 1 millisecond being centered. So when it's at 1 millisecond, when it's facing either left or right, it's going to center the head so it's looking directly at you. Here are kind of what some of the pulse symbols would look like when it comes to, I guess what you'd call the theory of operation on how this would work. And it, like it says up here, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to see it very well. I'm really sorry. I'm trying my best to get so you guys can actually see this. But essentially the saying is the serial data is clocked out of the main CPU board to the monster's head in motion servo board at 125 bits per second. The data is accompanied by a transition-sensitive clock, both rising and falling transition, hence positive and negative. Like I was kind of mentioning before, it uses that as my interpretation of a DC motor, positive one direction, negative the other direction. It's kind of the same idea. And then the CPU is going to send 8-bit data words to the servo board to trigger the pre-recorded routines. And those pre-recorded routines are in this chip that I mentioned right there that says Frankenstein version 2.07. And that is what determines those positive and negative signals that are coming to this board to tell it
if it needs to move the monster's head towards the right direction, and for how many milliseconds to move it for that, and same with the left direction, and same for centering it. It's kind of a more complex thing than that. There's a lot more to it than what I'm trying to explain. I'm trying and keep it as basic as possible, and that's why I use the DC motor example. Imagine it again, like I said, positive direction moves the servo motors in one direction, while negative moves it in the opposite direction. And it's all because of this chip right here, that it's able to interpret those 8-bit data signals coming in from the CPU, as well as the clocking, to know where the position of the monster's head is at. So, now that I kind of explained some of that, in a very, very basic manner, like I'm telling you, it's as basic as it comes. There is a lot more to it, and that would probably be a whole video on itself, just trying to understand the complexity of how these signals are interpreted to make it work the way that it works. But other than that, I'm going to put you guys down for a sec. We're going to put the playfield down. We're going to fire at the game, and I'm going to show you what the monster's head's supposed to do, so you know if your Frankenstein pinball is working properly, at least with the monster's head motion. Alright, so we'll be right back. Okay, so now the playfield's put back down in place. Here's our Frankenstein's monster's head. He's looking a little bit to the right, but that was because the last time we played it, he was already moving when we turned it off. But we'll fire it up real quick, and you can kind of see the motions that he's supposed to be doing. Now, I guess as a quick side note, the reason why I replaced this was the original setup on servo and controller board. He was turning his head almost at a full 360, and he can't do that because once he gets over to this part of his collar, it will jam up, so I had to disconnect the board. And after replacing the servo and the controller board, he doesn't do that anymore. He's basically looking the way he's supposed to. See how he's centered out right away? Yep, there we go. See, and that's all those signals coming through to the board, being interpreted, knowing how far it needs to go for each motion from right and left. And sometimes he moves his head a little farther to the left, a little farther to the right. It just depends on the programming in the chip. I don't know much about the programming itself, but like I said, it's all about the programming. And the different types of signals coming in, rising and lowering and so on. You know, again, positive, negative. But that's pretty much how you replace the servo motor and the servo motor controller board for your Frankenstein monster. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, I wish I could go into more details on how it actually works, but that's probably the best way I can actually describe it for you guys to sort of make sense. And it might not even make sense for you. And if not, you know, throw down in the comments your own ideas on how the operation works for it, because I'm sure we all would like to hear it. Other than that, have a good one, guys, and we'll see you later.